they did something with MSN, and it's kind of freaky. They now, after they uploaded the browser, they now have this very light blue background behind some of the thumbnails, I guess you could call, for the stories. And that makes me wonder, did they agree to engage in some form of information warfare where they are selling options related to certain news items? See, it's one of those things that with the control of the media that's been going on in the United States, that's one thing. But if you have a situation where certain people have been put on a bandwidth or have been categorized to be made available for somebody else's hedging strategy, which is apparently what's going on, then if you don't know and you go to a particular news article that's been blue sheeted, does that mean that you're what? Purchasing that option for whoever it is that's got the timeshare on your electronic accounts for that time? I mean, because that's what my theory is. And so, like me, again, hasn't happened like it did this morning for a while. You wake up in the morning and somebody's running all kinds of rationales for their portfolio. And then throughout the day, things appear or things come up, and you may or may not engage with them as somebody already hedged on. This happened to me for years while I was on the street. As a matter of fact, most of the time I was on the street, this would happen. Right before you wake up, they're running something. And my understanding is that's part of what their telemedication regime is. That they're actually overnight or on the European markets or on the Asian markets, wherever their investment fund is working, they're coming up with all sorts of things based on market activity over there. And they've got people over in other parts of the world that are running their deals for those markets. And then, those people are going to have to sleep or do something overnight. And then during the day in the United States or in this hemisphere, it comes to you, and you may be one of a number of people. I mean, I've never been able to successfully have a conversation with somebody else where we were able to track it down, because if we're able to communicate with each other and talk to each other about our cognizance, something always happens to permanently separate us within 72 hours, right? But is that what you're doing right now? Okay, what I got up right here is this article about Poland and Israel concerning a property law. And Israel saying, well, all of these things that have been, voided or been abandoned for 30 years, I mean, that was taken from us. Well, I mean, what about those people that were used in the meantime in other parts of the world as some form of restitution and had their entire lives dispossessed of them, right? Because one of the rationales somebody's working with today is literally connected to a specific article I wrote. And I heard what you said. And not so ironically, it had to do with this very article here. But I didn't find this very article until I found how somebody tried to peg the 100th anniversary of the Chinese Communist Party as a swap out on that bandwidth deal that was pending last night this time, right? So you guys replace Sri Lanka with China, or rather, you replace the Democratic Socialist Republic, the Democratic Socialist Party of Sri Lanka with the Communist Party of China in those rationales you're running from last night based on what I did in order to do this thing you've been doing for years, which is trying to screw over anybody who might have had some sort of connection with the former Soviet Union or arrangements the United States committed to with the former Soviet Union, and then sending it to China. And then when you send it to China, you have a way of characterizing it so that it ends up being the ultimate catastrophe that you could possibly get. At least with me, I always get the Chinese Holocaust, right? Everybody else is doing something else. They don't have time or room for me. I end up being the solo person somewhere else watching, Chiang Kai-shek again. And literally that's what you did. You only make it the Communist Party long enough to create a smokescreen to blame. But then you give me the Christian fundamentalists that are working old deals with Chiang Kai-shek. And the weird thing is the Department of Justice presumably 2 years ago busted somebody who was alleged to have engaged in bond fraud with the Obama and the Bush administration related to what were alleged to be fraudulent bonds connected to the era wherein the United States and the United Kingdom made deals with Chiang Kai shek. I don't think they were fraudulent. I think the United States and the United Kingdom made very, very significant financial relationships with Chiang Kai shek as part of the resistance to the Japanese. Chiang Kai shek won. But after that, there was another problem, right? There was another process, and then the Communist Party won. The Maoist won over Chiang Kai shek. And because the United States and the United Kingdom made the deals with Chiang Kai shek after Chiang Kai shek lost, and the People's Republic of China was formed, I believe the United States and the United Kingdom had every intention of holding China to the terms they negotiated with Chiang Kai shek. And I believe those were long-term terms. And that the United States and the United Kingdom have been engaging with China as if they're obligated to the deals they set up with Chiang Kai shek. I mean, it's a pretty serious situation, right? Because the kind of numbers that China was able to sustain and the kind of numbers that Chiang Kai shek was willing to leverage in order to be successful is the kind of thing the United States would never admit it would do. And I already know that China did something in regards to a cognizability of those factors last summer, right? And now, these machinations they're doing here in the United States without disclosing what the terms of this mutual fund that they allowed for, an organization responsible for recovering contracts through the New York Federal Reserve that have not been able to deliver because, of the COVID. It's very, very disingenuous. It's very, very unacceptable. So you're going to need to go with what I heard the first thing this morning, which is that, yes, the reason they're hiding me is because they screwed up that bad and it wasn't their life. And because I haven't ceded and I'm not going to, they cannot legitimize or justify a number of things they've tried to convince other people they did. I'm not Chiang Kai shek. You understand? I'm also not Mao Zedong. But I am not Chiang Kai shek, and I am not going to let my entire fucking life continue to be trashed and expropriated because illegal, unconscionable, and heinous deals were made with other people to exploit people for no good reason except their opportunism and the fact that they probably are actually the ones that owe for Holocaust reparations. Is this why you're so obsessed, Texas, with the Confederate Pension Fund? Because the slavers and the rich people just purchased somebody else's mineral rights on their family to pay for the obligations theirs had for losing the Civil War? Let's get to the point. I apologize, Poland. I apologize, Germany. I apologize, Eastern European Jewry. But you got to understand that whatever it is you're talking about, I'm pretty sure is about the pension fund, the Texas retirement system, the Americanized global pension scheme. How many families in Texas that allowed for the annexation and agreed to slavery paid somebody else to go fight in their stead? And when Texas lost the Civil War, rather than holding its own slavers and property owners responsible, they took out some sort of loan or indemnification concerning the people they tried to get fight in the stead of their own family. And now everybody else in Texas is kept intentionally divested and impoverished at a certain level so that those people can continue. And they conspire and they engage themselves with comparably minded people in all kinds of sectors, from all kinds of national backgrounds and all kinds of nice, very rich genetic and cultural property, so that they can figure out a way to lie and scheme and say they've got somebody else under contract to pay when they screw up. And that's what's going on, isn't it? You already know that they were told in September of 2016, during the election campaign, that their little deal to play like they were entitled to say that the only person who could negotiate these terms was the president, and then to knowingly and willingly try to engage people in efforts to hack other people's processes. You already know that there's absolutely nothing legally justifiable about it. And that's why you've kidnapped me. And the problem I already know is, even by your own terms, you've got less than 2 to 3 months where that whole shit falls down, right? But this is probably what you did right up to September 11th, didn't you? Texas, how many people did you kidnap in 1999, 2000, and 2001 to do something like this to? And allow to get hooked up with completely fraudulent, illegal, extortionate contracts that you just refuse to adjudicate, even through your precious administrative proceedings, so that you could intentionally use them as proxies for the people you killed in 9/11. You evacuated their human capital. Through whom? They didn't just die. They had all their assets stolen from them before they were murdered. But in order for it to be successful, you would have had to divert them through somebody else. Did you do that to people in Texas? Were there people literally in Texas, on site, in the state where the business site is of your major insurance brokers were, that were being kidnapped and used to launder money and assets from people you intentionally orchestrated to be murdered during September 11th? Yes, you did. Oh my God. And the conspiracy is so fucking incredible. It's so spectacular that you've literally bound the entire state to silence while you follow through on those orchestrations. Oh my God. Well, it's blown now. What are you going to do? You're not going to be able to get away with this. It's already untenable. You're going to have to execute your major option this morning. You need to let that satanic son of a bitch know he's not going to be able to get away with this. Stop it. Stop it.